Beautiful. Okay. No, where did it go? Yeah. Thank you. Stop.
I'm African American, born and raised in the South, Southern Baptist, and I became Muslim. I'm 48 years old. I became Muslim almost 30 years ago, and it was the best decision of my life. I thank Allah every day for allowing me to be Muslim. As I look back on it now, over 30 years, as a little boy, there were breadcrumbs along the way. So when I was in church, I had questions, lots of questions. I grew up in a very typical southern town where everyone got along, but there was this ever-present tension, and the societies were polarized. So all the blacks lived in one area, all the whites lived in an area. And it just, as a boy, it didn't make sense to me. I believed that I went to church every Sunday, and may God bless my mother, because when I became 16, she said, if you want to go, you can go. If you don't want to go, you don't have to go. But the message spoke to me. So I love the history of the Bible. But I had questions. And then one afternoon, I think I was 10 or 12 years old, and I was at home alone and just watching afternoon television. And I'll never forget this movie, Charlton Heston's movie, El Cid. And I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm a kid, and I love adventure, and it's set in Muslim Spain, which I never heard of. What's Muslim Spain? And at one point, Charlton Heston is working with the Muslims, and he's working against the Muslims, and the Muslims are dignified and noble, and they're bad Muslims and good Muslims. And I thought, what's a Muslim? So I asked a reverend, and I said, Reverend, what's a Muslim? What's Islam? And he gave me an answer that I was 12 years old and it didn't make sense. And then when I got to university, I kept coming across this word, the Ottoman Empire. I thought, well, who are Ottomans? And so the more I read, at one point at university, the angrier I became, because I felt I'd been told this great lie. One, that there were these civilizations that were prominent before Western civilization, and also that many of them were Muslims. So who were the Muslims? And I began to read about Islam, and one day I happened to be in the bookstore, college bookstore, and there was the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I just bought it, and it changed my life. It opened windows in my mind, really, and that led me on a spiritual journey. And I went to the library and I gathered every book. I said, okay, I had a panic attack. I said, you know what? My heart is saying Islam is right, but my head says, you know, this is your eternal soul. This is not something to play with. You have to be absolutely sure that this works for you intellectually, spiritually, economically, socially. You have to be sure that this works. It answers, because my heart was saying this is right. It feels good. It feels right. And then I checked out every book in the library I could find about Islam. Islam in China, the Silk Road, Genghis Khan's great-grandson, his views on Islam, and Kublai Khan, and one of the Khans became Muslim, and Islam in Africa, and how Islam spread through trade, not through the sword, and the Abbasid and Muslim Spain and Bosnian brothers. I read everything I could about Islam and how Islam came to the West, and how there were Africans that were in bondage that were Muslims, and how they endeavored to pray. And I read everything ideologically about Islam, the great Ibn Sina and Ibn Rushd, all the great intellectuals. And I thought, okay. And then one day I had a copy of the Quran in English, and I opened it one day, and it said, it doesn't matter whether you pray to the east or the west, but that you believe in Allah and the angels. And I closed it. I said, okay. And I went down to the local mosque and I did my Shahada. And that was the best decision I ever made. I'm far from a saint. I played football. I got to college on a football scholarship, but I decided to become Muslim on my own. Like, this was a journey that I did by myself. And I didn't take into account the impact it would have on my family. My mother and uncles and aunts and brother, they were devastated. I've been Muslim 30 years. Some of my relatives still, most of my relatives, to be honest, only after being Muslim 25 years have two of my mom and my brother been able to call me Mujahid. I utterly was naive and I didn't expect that level of resistance. Maybe a little bit, but I thought maybe after a couple of years they'd get over it, you know. But Southern Baptists and people who are not educated, and more fear. Not fear of Khomeini. When I grew up, there was only Khomeini, Imam Khomeini, and Gaddafi. Those were the two prominent themes of Islam when I was a kid. And the constant war in Beirut. But people were afraid to say Malcolm X's name in my town. I remember, maybe as a boy, I asked, who's Malcolm X? Maybe I saw Muhammad Ali talking about shh, don't talk about Malcolm X. It has gotten better. In my family, it's gone from war to truce. And I come home and I'm, very polite. And I care for them and I go to church with them and I speak to their reverends. But there's always this tension. I love them, but I became Muslim for me, and my soul is my own. It has brought a great peace to me, because when I got to university and began to read about colonialism and imperialism, seething anger erupted in my heart. And I see young people now protesting, and I see that was me, 30 years ago. And without Islam, the protest, the anger, the fight consumes you, or can consume one. I would meet, when I lived in California for a while, it was long after I was Muslim, I would meet ex-Panthers, ex-Black Panthers and Black revolutionaries. And I felt sorry for them, but also I said, Mujahid, without Islam, that's you. And actually one ex-Panther pulled me aside, he was giving a talk. And he said, someone asked him in the audience, who evolved? It was an interesting question. He said, who's evolved from the 70s? He said, the most successful in his mind Muslims, the most successful Panthers, ex-Panthers were the Muslims. He said, the Muslims worshiped Allah. And he said, that was the difference. So for me, back to your question, it's brought me a tremendous peace, an ability to navigate my own anger and frustration with salat. I tell my buddies, salat and a little bit of chocolate and life looks a lot better. 90% of all Muslims are good people. They're honest, they're hardworking, they care for their families. Focus on the 99%. And I think your world will be ecstatically happy and beautiful and patient and magnificent. But remember, Islam is perfect and Muslims are not.